Happy Monday. I am Brad Hutchings, and this is the Break It Down show with executive producer Pete A. Turner.
Oh, thanks, man. That's super. That's super extra and awesome. I love extra.
I try.
Yeah, you do. You do. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. I know we always talk about AI, the AIs, generative algorithms, large language models. I said that with my best, what's her name voice?
Large. No.
I meant, what's her name? Hepburn, not Audrey, but the other one. And
Catherine.
Catherine Hepburn. In my head, that's how you say that, with like a little warble in my voice. So Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for all the great words. Thanks for all the help with understanding all this AI stuff. I'm interested in where you're at now. I know we've been talking about MMOJO, which was Papaid at one point, but now it's MMOJO. And
there
is, there it is. And we've been talking about a large, a private LLM that goes in your house, hooks up to your Wi-Fi, and doesn't escape your house, right? It's just where I'm saying in your house, it can be in your pickup truck, where we want it to be.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about MMOJO.
So MMOJO is this little box. You can find it at MMOJO, MMOJO. And by the way, it's just pronounced Mojo, but since the idea came from Papaid, which is of course your naming a couple of shows ago, we are sticking with the name.
Give me the website again.
MMOJO.net.
To get your Mojo.
Now, this website is a little bit under construction, as is everything that I do, but I will assure you and your viewers that this thing is ready to build, custom, and send to you. And in fact, I built this one yesterday afternoon.
Nice. And wait, first off, did you like my theme song that I came up on the fly that I was doing for you as I was trying to get the show set up? Yeah.
Yes,
I had horns in it.
Yes, you did have horns. That was pretty amazing. I mean, the viewers can't understand it, just what we talk about it, unless you do it. But it was pretty good. It was definitely good.
I decided I was kind of freestyling it into something. Then I found a melody that I liked. And then I put in a horn line and a guitar line and some drums.
I will say that the horns sounded more like horns than Keith Richards' Fuzzbox, for sure.
Yeah, well, so I learned to play the mouth horn in a couple of places. One, my buddy he graduated from UC Davis, and they hired a backdoor band. And they were a wonderful 3-piece band, and the lead singer sang, but he also did mouth horn. And he would do, whatever, right? Do Chuck Mangione and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I think I could do that. I can.
Yes.
And then when I was at Fort Huachuca, a cavalry post still does bugle calls because it's a cavalry post, even though it's the home of MI and Signal. For whatever reason, we've maintained. Well, here's why you maintain your roots, because it's the south part of Arizona where the Indian Wars were had, and it was all cavalry then, and it's a Buffalo Soldiers. It's a deep part of that area's history. Anyhow, our sergeant major, before formations, when we'd have to practice big marching parade type things, he would give out the bugle calls so that we would remember them. Or if you hadn't been exposed to them, you would know them. And so everything's done with the bugle in terms of like the positions they want you to be in. So if you're going to go to the position of attention, it's this. And there's one called the adjutant's call. It's like, and it's like this goes, and then the adjutant walks across this ridiculously big field as fast as they can go and everything. But it's hilarious. And so the sergeant major will be out in the middle of the field going, that's actually parade rest. Attention. There you go. Mouth trumpet.
All right. What's the Mets walk-up music for? You know what I'm talking?
Yeah.
That's not trumpet though.
Headwind. Yeah, no, I mean, it's horns. It's for sure horns. Yeah. Yeah. But I guess that's not getting us anywhere near where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be talking not about your theme song.
Right.
Mouth trumpet. Yeah.
Very good. So the Mojo it's a device. It plugs into your network. Think about it as ChatGPT, except it won't spill your private information that you mistakenly share with it. And it won't rat you out. So, and then hopefully it gives you a way to start to use AI LLMs. I would call it correctly, like in line with what they do, rather than imagining that they do all these wonderful things that they don't do.
Right.
And that kind of gets us to our topic today.
Yeah, I guess let's go ahead and go. Take the wheel and tell us where we're headed.
Yeah, so Pete was telling me about, he was asking me a question about something. I can't remember quite what it was. But it wasn't, it was after we did the little discussion on the median baseball or MLB debut and asking Grok or whoever what that is. And what I often do with Pete is Pete will ask me this thing, and Pete knows that I'm going to say, hey, that's bullshit. That doesn't work. But Pete wants to hear the explanation of why. That's bullshit. That doesn't work. This is my mouth trumpet right here, right? My version of it. And it's usually saying, that's bullshit. Okay. You have to sit and you have to think. You have to be the LLM. What are we asking the LLM to do? And then what's it going to do? And now, is that what we expect a thinking human being to do? And the answer to that is usually, no, that's not what we expect. So, for instance, we tell the LLM, hey, I want to know the median baseball player debut, and please go get the information from baseballreference.com, right? And so we've told it to do this. It comes back with an answer. It doesn't say, hey, I couldn't get the data from baseballreference.com. So we assume, hey, it got the data from baseballreference.com. And it turns out that it didn't. It just didn't tell you it didn't. So this is where our expectations get mismatched with this thing because it's trying to please us. It tries to give us an answer. And we're happy with the answer, and we're not totally knowledgeable about the process, or we've assumed a process that's not actually happening.
Right.
So anyway, Pete.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. This is a good place for you to add something.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find the median debut of all baseball players. This line moves as medians are wont to do when things get bigger. So I know approximately where it's going to be. And at this point, I knew it was September 1959, thereabouts. Right. And there aren't that many debuts to quickly fish through them and figure out which one it is. And it's a bit of nuggery. Like, so I'm going to click on Brad Hutchings, 10,372. Nope, not quite high. I'm going to go down a couple more lines. Oh, Tony Alvarado, 10,000. And then, there it is, right? And so I'm just going through and reading the number. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if this LLM could go in and just figure out what number it is? Look for the guy who is the 10,715th debut in Major League history, right?
Right.
And so it's like, I don't know. It's like 1980, and it did math. I'm doing math. Hang on over here. It did math. Lied to me about that. Yeah, no, it didn't. And then it kept trying and trying, and I kept saying, no. And I knew the answer, so I didn't want to give it the answer. I wanted it to get the answer. And so I said, no, that's nowhere near right. You're off by a couple of decades. Try to reconstitute your answer and consider how many debuts there actually are each year. Something like that. I'm trying to guide it so it can do the job better. And so it comes back and it's like, I got it. It's this person, like still off by over 15 years. You know, you're putting too much value on how many debuts and use these resources, baseball reference, that kind of thing. And it could not reliably get it. I walked it in to where the answer was by slowly giving it more and more information. But a human wouldn't have needed that information.
Right. Because a human is like looking up information. Presumably they might even look up, okay, how do I find the median if they don't know what that mathematical term is? Sure. You've told them the source of the data. They probably go and open up the source of data. They start to discover that there are charts with the debut order of players that you can access. And then you can look at total numbers of players and players by year, and you can start to use that sixth grade math that you're so good at to figure out, hey, where about is this that I'm going to find this median? And then you might even count back and forth on your fingers and toes to figure out this guy is really, really close to the median. Okay, he's player 10,412 out of 20,826. I'm one off. I go to the next player. I've got it. Use your mental faculties to do that. And this is not the process that LLMs use to create an answer. They create an answer by producing one random likely word at a time to compose a plausible English sounding answer. That's how they make an answer. It's a totally different process. Now, there's some problems that's good for, and there's some problems it's not. Mathy and analytical problems, those are problems it's not.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this too. Quite often, any of the LLMs, they're very literal. And so if you use a colloquialism, it might apply. You actually might see a picture of someone, their hat in the ring, and you're like, that's not what I need you to, no. So when you come across, and I'll just use the word homonym, there's a lot of things in the homonym-like world, but if I use the word made and made, it doesn't necessarily infer the right answer. And I'm using made and made because they're quite different, but they sound the same, right? Or other words that are sound different but are spelled the same. All these different weird things that happen in English. How does an LLM or a generative algorithm, if we're going to call it that, how does it deal with homoninity?
I don't know specifically how one model is going to deal with another, but typically it's word distance. So in all of their training data, if they've seen these homonyms together, close to each other in training data, they're going to start to associate them as related words, related tokens. And if they don't, they don't. So you're relying on, for any information that you're going to get out of the LLM, and I'm not calling it knowledge. I take some liberties calling, what Mojo produces knowledge, but it produces information. And a lot of the times the information is pretty correct. It's pretty it jives with reality, it jives with experience, and it's good information. And a lot of times it shows that it's made up, right? We sometimes call that hallucination, and we think that's a bad thing about these LLMs. In actuality, it's not really bad. It's just what they do.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if people have written a lot about maid and maiden, or maid and maid, or made in and maiden, hey, what's your maiden name? My maiden name is San Diego. That's my maiden name.
Right.
Right.
I was going to say my maiden name is Lars. I am Lars.
Lars isn't even in that band. Yeah. Bruce Dickinson's going to hate you. He's watching right now, and he's like, Pete doesn't remember me. It's terrible.
No. Did you say Chris Dickinson? That's hilarious.
I said Bruce Dickinson. I didn't
heard
mess
you say
up his
Chris.
name.
My bad. I can't
That's
hear
all
shit,
right.
so let's blame that on me. But okay, so homographs, homonyms, all these things. Like, so if I say, "Oh, I'm going to jump into the pool at work," even you are going to have to be like, "Which kind of pool are you talking about?" And I'm going to be like, "Oh, football pool."
Yes.
And now you'll know, right? But if you ask an LLM and you say, "Oh, a football pool," it might draw for you a picture of a swimming pool that looks like a football field.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I recently asked Grok to write an essay in the literary style of Dexter Manley about how to prepare for each defensive play in the NFL. Now,
all right.
If you know about Dexter Manley, the one thing you know about him is he can't read. He still can't read.
He still can't read?
He still can't reid. After we made fun of him for not being able to read 30 years ago, the guy did not take it upon himself to improve his literacy. But hell of a defensive end, right? I mean, an absolute monster on the field. So exactly the kind of guy you would want to write a book on, an essay on how to prepare for each defensive play in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But Grok wrote it for me because I asked it to. Right? So anyway, the topic we're really going to get to today is Michael Crichton coined this term in 2002. Michael Crichton, the author of science fiction-y kind of giant tales, and big movies were made out of them, like Jurassic Park and Disclosure. You name a whole bunch of them. He was a great author, and we really miss him. He died an untimely death, and it's too bad, because the things he would be commenting on today, he would put to rest with a few paragraphs. Like, he was that powerful of a writer. Michael Crichton coined this term called Gell-Mann amnesia in 2002. And it was named after a physicist that he had conversed with, whose last name was Gell-Mann, hyphenated. And Gell-Mann amnesia is when you pick up the newspaper and you read a story and you're an expert in the field. And so you know that the whole story is bullshit, made up facts, made up opinions, doesn't represent the debate, absolute garbage. You turn the page in the newspaper and then everything you soak up and you're like, wow, I really learned something looking at this. You don't realize, you think that they just mess up what you're an expert at. you don't realize they pretty much mess up everything.
Right.
And so yeah, that would be Michael Crichton right there.
There's a man jumping into a football pool at work.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay, I got you. It's not
And
Michael
here's this
Crichton
thing.
jumping into it.
Football
Right.
pool at work.
It's terrific. But see, that's like using there you're using Grok pictures to do something funny, which is great. You're taking advantage that it's going to goof it up to make it funny,
Yeah,
and that's amazing. There's a lot of people who are horrified by that.
Yeah, no, it is funny, and it's a good use for it. But I don't want to get us distracted from the
Yes,
gentleman
yes.
because
So
that's important.
so I got to thinking, Pete's pretty funny because he's always calling me and asking me, "Okay, Brad, I know this doesn't work. I know you're going to tell me this doesn't work, but it sure feels like it works." And what were we talking about? I know what we're talking about, report writing. Right. And I actually, we were on different sides of this because I said this could actually be useful. And you said there's no way it's useful.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting, but that's what made me think, it's funny. We dissect each of these things that we come up with and really try to think, what does the LLM do here? And we're both sort of surprised by the answer that we get. And yet we continue to ask the same question that invariably has the same answer. Just a different question to ask the LLM.
Yeah.
We have like Gell-Mann amnesia, except I think I would call it what's a reference to, it's not really in reference to, not in spite of, it's like a hat tip to the Peter principle. I would call this the Pete A principle or the Pete A effect.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. We did reverse roles when we were talking about this because you were like, no, it can tell you the story. And I'm like, but it can't. Like the way I create a patrol report, which is called a lot of different names in the military. And I'm talking specifically Pete's version of an intelligence report, maybe called a PIPR, maybe called an IR. The R is the report. That's the main thing. And so I'm going to tell you like the characteristics of that patrol, 5 May 2025, went to Santa Ana High School. Maybe I give you a grid coordinate, time, the who, what, where, when, why, how, all that kind of stuff. And that's all just straight facts, right? And then I'm going to tell you what I saw, what I did, the conversation I had, and I might do my best to do a translation or a transcript of the translated conversation that I had. And I'm writing down notes as fast as I can. I'll show you. I've got a green notebook right here. This is what this looks like. You probably can't see all that, but I'm furiously scribbling notes, right? And there's all kinds of stuff that later on I've got to figure out what all that says, right? And so it's not easy. It's not easy at all to do that because I'm writing in real time, real fast as I can. So the process then is to extract that information, put it into my head with all of the other patrols that are in my head, and start writing down and providing context at the end of it. So the facts and all that stuff, what I observed, and then what I think it means. And sometimes you pull a report from 4 months ago because you encountered the same dude. And you're like, I've talked to this dude before. And you put all these things together. And so that process takes hours and hours, maybe 6 hours on average, to write this thing. Because you're also writing for a multi-tiered audience. Because some analyst 4 levels above me is going to take one line from our report that suits their other reports. And maybe that person can use an LLM. And they're going to take that one fact and twist it into a different fact and post into report. And I'll see these things. I'll see these instances of my report. And that would help me, right? Is be like, who has used anything from this report in other things? Because one thing I am looking for, and this is where I come back around to you, is I'm looking for when my words impact operations, when my words become their words that they say in the briefings or the command or whoever it is, right? That's what I'm looking for. But it can't put the words on the report for me because it's too complex and it's hard for me to do. I've got to slow down, often a 2-person job, or someone's leaning over your head typing, you're trying to type. Almost got like a brainless kind of transcription typing as they're going. And then I've got to jump in and say things, very complex form of writing. LLM couldn't do that. Maybe they could clean it up on the back end, but I don't want to slow that product down because it also has to be out as fast as I could possibly get it out. Like if I take 6 hours, that's 4 hours too long. I need to get this thing out when I say ASAP, I don't mean like civilian ASAP, like I get that one. ASAP in the military is as soon as fucking possible. Why aren't you done? That's what ASAP stands for.
Right. So if you're
yeah.
if you're an expert at writing these reports, you probably don't need help with the format. Now,
Right.
if you don't write reports too often, this is where an LLM can help you. It's just the format. Just show me a sample report so I can write alongside of it, except fill in my facts, fill in my conclusions. That can be really, really useful. And that actually is when people talk about vibe coding or coding with AI or whatever else, it's essentially what they're talking about. Is they're talking about, give me sample code for this so I can either incorporate some sample code into what I'm doing, or I can use it as sort of an outline for what I'm trying to do. Like that's how that's how a professional coder would use AI to help them write code, not just write this for me and then, oh, I've got, it's this beautiful product now that I'm ready to release.
And that's not possible in the report writing world because it is a three-dimensional real-time world. It is not constrained to code. And I'm not saying code's easy. I'm just saying you can more reliably look for an A to B outcome. I may start at A and end up at basketball. And that happens all the time in Intel report writing. You'll come to some kind of realization. Like, I'll go work out. I'll take a nap. I'll take a shower, and I'll be like, "Oh my God, I just remembered this one thing," and I'll put it all together. There's just not an LLM that can do that because I'm doing higher level thinking than it possibly can.
Right. Now, you may get to a paragraph that you've written, probably not a factual paragraph, but a kind of a provide context, make a conclusion paragraph. And you may look at that paragraph and you may say, yeah, this is how I'd write this, but I'd like this to be written in, say, a different kind of voice that's more convincing, that says this is very imperative that you look at it, upgrades the importance of it, those kinds of things. And so you say, here's my paragraph. I write this in a more convincing voice. And it will turn around and it might get something pretty close to what you're trying to express, but in a more forceful, convincing voice that will make for a better product, right?
And for sure, there's some of that in Intel. It's a sales job. And so you've got to sell that command to what you're writing. And the first thing you do is you write a headline. We call it a bluff, bottom line up front. So the commander knows why they're reading it. Well, that's a sales job right there. And so you're saying, we will get shot, like lead with death. Right. And the commander's like, holy shit, we're going to get shot. What is that? And no one's getting shot, everybody. There's robots listening. No one's getting harmed. It's just an example. But that's what you have to do, right? And so you could take that and say, write this like Henry Miller. And you're like, you know what? Actually, don't do that. I want to keep my job. But you could use a voice like Zig Ziglar, and make this thing, whatever, and possibly do that. But that would be after I did the hard work of getting this thing done. And then, again, I'm going to say this. I need to get this thing out. I don't have time. Like, I don't know that I ever wrote a complete draft of anything.
Right.
Like, this is me. This is my report. It's rough draft. You're getting it fast. Don't expect another one, and it just goes out the door because that's how fast you got to be. Now, I'm saying rough draft. It's not a finished product, not meant to be. There might be typos in it, but speed is more important than accuracy. And this is before like automatic editing and all that kind of stuff. So, everybody kind of understood, hey, we're moving fast here. And as long as it read pretty clean, you were good to go.
Yeah, definitely. And that's great. I mean, look at the requirements of what you're doing and decide, hey, is there an application for an LLM in what I'm doing here? And maybe there's not. Maybe that's where real-time tools that say, hey, maybe you should put this word before this word or whatever else, what Grammarly or whatever, might be helpful to you doing that. It also might introduce friction in that you go and you make all these corrections and you look at all of its suggestions and you waste a whole bunch of time doing that when you really need to get this thing out. That can happen too.
Right. The other thing too is, and I don't know how Grammarly works, but it's an LLM of sorts. I need to have the right style guide. Because the military works on, this actually has two different style guides, if you can believe that shit. But it has a style guide, and there's rules to that style guide. And I've not seen Grammarly or anybody else allow you to click on AP versus APA versus, all these different styles of style guide. I've not seen that either.
Yeah, you need to be pretty close to what they're doing and then able to make those decisions quickly when it makes a suggestion that you don't like.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm big on I will not dangle a preposition. That will not happen in my writing.
How about your
So
participles?
I'm not doing that either. So yeah, so sometimes these grammar checkers are a little bit they're not helpful to me because they say that's acceptable now. Just leave it and let it flow. And when I try to rewrite it, it actually will suggest, hey, dangle the preposition.
Yeah.
Well, no, I don't want to do that. I mean, you should be able to see that's what I'm trying not to do here and not suggest that to me. But again, you know, this is where your smart friend, your smart automated friend can get in the way, cause more trouble than he's worth.
And there's a lot of pacing in human writing.
Yes.
That's important because a lot of us write as if we're trying to speak this thing. And you're not writing necessarily conversationally, but there is a cadence to how I write. And there's all kinds of new grammar now that, or punctuation that didn't exist before. The, you know, the hyphen, the hard hyphen, the slash.
The M dash, yes.
Yeah, all of these things that I don't even know what the rules are to these things, but I think I try to use them. You know, I use semicolons and colons a lot more than I'm probably supposed to.
Pete, do you know? Do you even know how to type an M dash on your Windows machine?
Do I? On my phone, yes.
On your phone, easy. On the computer.
Yeah. I probably have known it, but do I know now? No.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
That's where I was a week ago. Somebody showed me. I've committed it to memory because I like the M dash, and also because people are starting to look for M dashes and emoticons as signs that LLMs wrote your stuff because they're difficult to type unless you have a Mac. So so they figure, okay, if you've got those things, well, then it's an LLM writing, not you. So me thinking 2 steps ahead, how can I convince you this was written by a machine when it was written by me? I'm all about the M dash now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then, I mean, I use dashes. I don't know if they're N or M or just regular dashes. But yeah, I don't know.
Regular dash, N dash is a little bit longer, and the M dash is about twice the width of a regular dash. And usually in your own writing,
the dash,
you'll type and you'll assume it's an M dash, and sometimes the print software will convert that for you.
Right. Okay, so back to this P-Day principle. You know, we get these. So one of the things that I've noticed about an Intel report's a good example. I'll go on the same report as a bunch of people who are working at I'm just going to say a lower level, right? They haven't deployed as much as me, so they don't have the experience. They don't have the feel. You know, there's a German word for it from the Clausewitz world, but I understand this world better than they do. And so they'll go out and they'll write the same kind of report that their peer did a year ago. And neither of them realize this, but I do because I watch them do it over and over again. And then the next unit will come and that guy will perform the act of being my first year here. I'm going to get it right. And they'll write the same fucking report. And so I am looking to, and this is my job. I look over the hill and I go, oh, we're fucking up. And then I go around the hill and I write down what actually happens, right? Commanders love that. I made a lot of money doing that because they saw that I understood where they were weak. And when you go to LLMs and if there's over 25 years, 25 reports about going to school 15 in Valley L, right? And I write something that's contrary because I know what the answer is because I've been there longer, or I've been to even that being in Valley L, I've been to so many valleys. I know what we're going to screw up. If I use an LLM to write that report or to accentuate my report, it's going to give me the preponderance of evidence that is incorrect. And so
generally, and you know, but of course, it's going to give you something plausible, and that might usually be the preponderance of evidence. But sometimes if you have it regenerate, it'll go off on some angle that's plausible and interesting, like more interesting than the rest, because it's not synthesizing facts, it's synthesizing words.
Right.
And then then its facts emerge from those arrangement of words.
Right.
The facts are not embedded in they're not embedded in the creation of the words.
There's a lot of things that we use that they are AI already, and we probably didn't realize it. When I write this headline for this episode, I should probably use the AI recommended one, and that's been around for quite some time. They'll recommend several.
Yeah,
headlines
they have a heuristic to make a good headline, to make a good
right,
eye-catching headline. Yes.
yeah, and you'll notice that it's like the shocking reality of, and they write
Right.
these kind of words all the time, and
Right.
I'm like, yeah, but that's not what's in this thing, and I'm just old school, so I'm not going to lie to my viewer about something that's in there. I'm going to keep it very simple, searchable.
Yes.
Okay. So Brad Hutchings, Mojo, the private LLM that solves everything, right? And I don't know
Right.
how good of a title that is, but that's the title. It's going to say the shocking secrets revealed, and then
Right.
that
And
face,
then not
you know?
not have
Hey, let's make
Mojo
the
in the
face
title.
right now.
Right.
Let's make the face right now. You do.
Right.
Okay,
And then
yeah, perfect.
not have Mojo in the title, and then you've got to read 7 paragraphs in before it tells you what the product name is.
Yes, and so
Yes.
so if you are susceptible to an information operation, which is what everybody calls a psyop these days. By the way, everybody, it's called an information operation. Psyop is the discipline above that.
Right.
So if you're susceptible, and we all are, to an information operation, and words like shocking, ghoulish, all these kind of words, the grizzly and all that kind of thing. When you get these adverby kind of explosive words, adjectives are key for information operation. You see a lot of adjectives, you're being fucking manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in that world and you want that outcome, the A's is a great example. The people that hate the A's and want the A's to fail write a lot of bullshit. And so Grok will go out when I ask it and it'll be like, look at all these facts I found for you. And I'm like, that's a bunch of bullshit. That's a bunch of bullshit, And so they're susceptible to their own things. And you start to, and I did this with the median ball player. The answer was so compelling that I was gaslighting myself into believing that maybe I was wrong. I double checked my work and I'm like, am I wrong about this? And I did some like random surveying of players to be like, no, I'm doing this right. Because maybe I am wrong. It wouldn't be the first time I totally thought I was right and ended up being wrong. But that's what happens, right? And this is part of this P-Day principle, I think, is that if you are susceptible to these things, if the preponderance of evidence confirms your bias, well, you're just going to get a more eloquent version of your bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the bigger problem, Pete, and I think this has come to light with the recent Joe Rogan interview, is, and this is why you try to pin the word expert on me. I don't want any part of it, which is we do not trust experts because people who've claimed to be expert at something turn out to not be very expert at it. They turn out to be full of shit or pushing a line or whatever else. The Joe Rogan interview between Douglas Murray and comedian Dave Smith, and Murray came right at him. And by the way, just as a disclosure, that there's 2 issues here. There's Israel and there's Ukraine. And you'll find me with Murray like in lockstep on Israel for reasons that are mine are different than his, but you'll find me diametrically opposed to him on Ukraine for reasons that he doesn't attribute to his enemies. So this is not about, hey, I'm on team Douglas Murray. Sure. He's right. He's been, he asked Dave Smith specifically, have you been to Ukraine? Have you been to Israel? Answer, no. Well, what's your qualification for this debate? And Dave Smith was, he might as well have said, I once told a dick joke. Well, glad to have the guy who tells dick jokes telling us how we should feel about civilization and about, wars that are within civilization and stuff like that, fought by civilizational rules.
Yes.
What a weird debate to be having.
Yeah. Well, like in the anti-A's fan world, if I was to say, what's your qualification? I hate John Fisher. It's not a qualification. Okay, you hate him. That's fine. We get that. All right. I don't know what to do about that. I can't help you not hate him. You're convinced of that. So we'll talk some other time. Talk about something else. But that's the only qualification they have is that they hate something and they've picked, and there's a lot of this in the big world. He hates these cans. And that's what a lot of us do about things. It's the thing that's funny about that joke. What makes it continue to be funny is we continue to do these things where we'll attribute a value to something, and it's not there. It's completely
Yeah.
wrong. And so when we do that with an LLM, it's going to oblige that he hates
Yeah.
these cans sensibility.
Yeah. And if you tell the LLM, hey, he doesn't hate the cans, guess what? He doesn't hate the cans.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing. But it is funny because like one of the things that seems to be happening, certainly with software developers, is the narrative is, oh well, the AI can write all the code. We don't need you anymore.
Right.
Your expertise is no longer needed. And I mean, it's stupid. It's offensive. It's ultimately self-destructive because you're going to have fewer people who are capable of doing these things that highly trained people need to do or are interested in doing it or doing it at a reasonable price. I mean, if I have to put up with you telling me that a machine could do my job, your price just went up because I have to deal with your bullshit. Right?
Yeah, I'm going to bill
So
you for that.
I'm going to bill you for that. Right? So it's like completely self-destructive, but it is this thing that we're on, that we're saying, hey, let's have the machine generate this so that we're not reliant on an expert having done it.
Right.
It's a very weird mentality, and it's definitely the mentality of, everybody on Twitter, every other post on Twitter is, I asked Grok about this and Grok told me this. And I'm like, wait a minute, Grok is your referee here. Well, no,
Yeah.
I mean, definitely have Grok as part of the discussion if you like. Find me this point of view and now let me look at your point of view and let me analyze it, let me think about it. That's actually healthy. But Grok is the arbiter of truth. Well, absolutely not. And of course, as you found with the median debut baseball player, what a bad move.
Yeah. 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 And there's so many of those things. And then for those who didn't watch the last episode, we started realizing that Grok, and I'm saying Grok, whatever LLM you want to use, if you're not hooked up to the web and it tells you it's looking up things, guess what? It didn't look those things up.
Or maybe not as detailed as you like. Now it may be be incorporating new websites, new stories and stuff into its training on a daily basis, but that doesn't mean that that's affecting its answers.
Right. So the other day, my buddy Matt Tardio had a conversation with Grok and convinced it that it was wrong about a piece of legislation that was written.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking on Matt because we all do these kinds of things, but he had a debate with Grok and won.
Yeah, Matt is kind of the worst offender on my timeline. But that's all right. I mean, it's like this is something we have to get through, which is how to use these tools, in a way that actually that improve our knowledge about things, improve our approach to things. If we're using it, I'm right, and I'm going to gather all the people who think I'm right, and then we're going to have a war with your people who think they're right. Gather all your cards, and we'll just play like the card game war, right? Okay, well, that's an interesting way to solve problems. But if you're really trying to explore an issue and find out what's a good solution we can all live with, Grok might be a starting point for that, not the answer point. Winning a debate against Grok is probably, I mean, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And did he win? I mean, we tend to forget that debates, they have an outcome, they have a score. Someone wins, someone loses. And you don't self-determine that.
Yeah, if you're on Team Grok, you probably like how Grok did against him.
Right. Grok voted you wrong.
Grok is unbeaten, right? So unbeaten in the eyes of the Grok fans, for sure.
Yeah. So these hallucinations, these machinations about our own beliefs about things, it doesn't mean that AI is not valuable. I struggle where I need to use it. Now, I've been messing with it. We're telling some stories. And then I take the blank page problem and I get rid of that. So I'm going to work for an hour on, this book that I'm writing or this project that I'm trying to create some text for. And there is some help there. Like right now I'm working on a project about a place in New Orleans in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And there's a lot of characters from there. And so I can, instead of from scratch making character studies, I can let Grok do character studies. And even if they're 50% inaccurate, which I don't know they are, I've got something to start with. And then I can go in and I can read and I can update that, but it's already there. So if I want 20 biographies and I give the names and the locations, I'm like, okay, these people are known to history. Let's see what happens. And it does a reasonably good job of getting me started. It's not something I would put in front of somebody though, especially if I was going to ask them for money.
Right. This place in New Orleans, was there any chance it was called the Rising Sun?
No, but it's part of that world. The place is a
I
community.
got it.
Oh, okay.
I was just making a joke.
Yeah.
A music joke. But
Yes.
no, but absolutely. I mean, if I'm trying to get my head around a situation, you know, write me a story about how somebody who's extremely tall would see visiting the House of the Seven Dwarfs in 1890. You know, and just give me like fill in some background, fill in some details based on the preposterous premise I just gave you, and see if you can convince me that this is a good story. Now, I might write another one from, you know, some other vector, and then, you know, as I read these, I'm like, okay, this is the kind of thing I need to convey in the story that I eventually write. That's going to bring the user in and be interesting, or these kinds of things that I had it expand on really weren't that interesting. I don't really want to go there. You know, I will still end up writing the thing in my voice. I'm not going to have the LLM write it, but I can have the LLM kind of give me different prototypes, different visualizations of, you know, how this might look, you know, if I take this angle or whatever else.
Yeah. When you have something like and I decided Grok write me a 250 word bio on a subject, and just glancing at it, it's pretty good. Like it's pretty good. It's good enough to like hold that basic background work that I'm going to give to somebody else, because I don't need to sell them on the character yet, right? It's just a character thing, and they may not even read this whole thing. But what I'm looking at, it's actually better than a 50% solution. It's probably, I don't know, and I just breezed through it while you were talking. It's probably 85%, which for this thing, probably good enough, right? And I can always go back through and sharpen it up, and I can change the style of it. And I think in those regards, AI is pretty helpful to me, because I can crank out a bunch of products, because someone always wants a different way to consume something, right? Give me a one sheet. And I always have to say, I am the one sheet, right? But they want a one sheet. All right, give me a one sheet. I can have Grok make a one sheet for something. I'm still going to spend time editing it and creating it. It's going to be a waste of my time. And the person looks at it and goes, okay, great, puts it on the desk. And I'm like, motherfucker, I worked for 12 hours on that thing. You know?
Right.
When we just could have gone out to lunch and be like, talk to me on the one sheet. But that said, what are other areas where you're trying to do production of things? And I mean, not just like my kind of production, but just you're trying to make things, trying to use Grok to your advantage. Like you said, everybody in that world wants to take somebody else's job and tell them it's irrelevant. So doctors are now using AI to look at x-rays, you know, and it just turns into, right. But what it turns into is, hey, now that you have this help, why don't you get more billable hours together, right? Like, let's speed up the pace, because you have this thing that's going to do this part of this job for you. And that's sort of the belief today.
Well,
are we going to get there though?
Look, everything with AI, a commercial aspect or whatever else, there's always some element of terrible Taylorism that goes into it, right? And Taylorism, for those who are, you know, who missed it in the beginning part of the century, there were these people who thought they could optimize every element of production. That you have this very capable, thoughtful human being who could unstick a machine or figure out a quick workaround, or, you know, kind of work on their toes or work when things aren't perfect. And yet what you're going to do is you're going to figure out every little thing to make them have the, you know, reach the highest peak of production at their station that they can. And what it does is it makes the job of optimizing, I guess, very, very interesting, and makes the job of actually doing the work really, really boring and gross. And yet we have a lot of people who just like to optimize stuff, and that's what they like to do. And it doesn't matter if they, you know, there's a whole sense of premature. Look, Pete, in the computing industry, there's a pioneer, if you will. He was a professor in the 60s and 70s named Dijkstra. Forget his first name, but he basically said that premature optimization is the root of all evil in software. And when he said that, he totally meant to evoke the premature ejaculation thing. He meant to evoke that visualization so that we got that this is not a good look, that you're sitting there trying to optimize everything that doesn't need to be optimized, and you look like a dork. Okay? We should be laughing at people who do this. And yet, somehow he lost out, and our whole industry is about optimizing everything imaginable. That doesn't, and it's expensive. And then when you optimize something and then you leave it alone and the optimization breaks, it's just twice as expensive to deal with it later because A, you have to figure out, okay, how did human beings do this before we automated? And then B, how do we fix the automation once we understand how we used to do this stuff? Whereas if we kept the knowledge about how the manual stuff was done, how the craft was done, if we kept that as we went, we wouldn't have those problems with optimization costing us more than it's worth.
Yeah, I love that. When is the right time?
I mean, it's probably when it's obvious that your optimization can save a whole bunch of money, and unfortunately, we don't. Sometimes we say, well, you say the solution's optimized. You don't say the solution is saving us a whole bunch of money, right? So I did this and I optimized it. Oh, great, optimize. It's like all the CSI shows where they got a photograph up and they're like enhance, enhance, right? And they can't enhance because the information isn't there. And if you understand information theory and you understand the basics of photography and you understand this is a 1 megapixel photo and you're treating it like it's a 16 megapixel photo, it's bullshit. It's not there. The pixels aren't there. You can't enhance, right?
Enhance.
So it's the same thing. Optimize, optimize, optimize. Are we optimized? Did you turn this in before you optimized it? Pete, what if you had to turn your report in optimized?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have time.
I don't have time, and it's already so hard to communicate vertically in these organizations, right? And then it's really when someone talks about like writing for your audience, I'm writing for a matrix audience. I don't mean the matrix, I mean an actual physical matrix. So here's State Department over here. I got my higher echelon units, potentially lower echelon units. I've got verticals going this way because I've got to deal with co-ops, FOOPs, all these other ops, entities. And so it becomes very hard to write for all these people in a clear way. And then again, you don't ever get to know the impact of it unless this is one thing that I did. And I think this will go back to AI. One of the things that I did was I had to be relevant to the people that I was writing for. And so I had to go interact with them. Hey, did you read my report? Oh yeah, Pete. Yeah. Great report. Have a nice day. See you later. And I'm like, oh, okay. What was compelling about it? Oh, like if you didn't read it, you just need to say you didn't read it and it's fine. And then they'd be like, all right, I didn't read it. And I'm like, you should. And then I had words to say, right? I'm selling now because the boss gets him every day. And I hear him talking about the stuff I'm writing about. I don't want you to get caught unaware. And then sure enough, the next briefing, the boss would say something. I'd look over that dude and he'd be like, fuck, I still didn't read that report. And I would slowly build a reading list, right?
Right.
I don't know how AI can help me with that. That's me doing the work.
So first thing to drive this point home is if some dude had read the thing that you'd written about, hey, these libraries don't like outside books. They like their own books. Well, you'd have saved a few lives with that. You literally would have saved a few lives if somebody had read that observation and internalized the observation.
Yeah.
So let's get to you think you're thinking, I think you think correctly. If I don't do the work, the actual work doesn't get done with producing these reports. And I think the converse is true, or the other side of that is true too. If I don't read the report doesn't get read. The action, the actionable information is not actionable unless it's read and understood and incorporated. And then the question that you ask is, and you asked it earlier in the show too, you kind of hinted at this, which is, can the AI tell me who has read my report or who has referenced my report? And it would be a nice thing if it could, but in actuality, it doesn't, LLMs don't index things that way. Right? So this gets back to this is kind of related to the can I talk to my documents?
Right.
Well, it's a real nice sentiment. Wow, we should all be able to talk to our documents. Let's use LLMs and do it. Okay, so now we use LLMs, we set up retrieval augmented generation, and then we find out, hey, I'm not really talking to my documents. It's almost worse than if I hadn't trained on the documents and I just talked to the LLM. It seemed to do better when it wasn't confused with actual information. How weird is that?
Yeah, that's weird.
I think you
like.
Why is that? Because this is the premature optimization thing. We think, hey, this is the process we use in order to do this. We don't stop and ask, what is this process giving us? Right? Does quote training on the document give us access to the document? The answer to that is no. It gives you access to word statistics. That's what it gives you access to.
Say that again in a different way.
Okay. The training process actually is, like with retrieval augmented generation, is I actually take a document. I use the computation from the model about how word statistics work, and I compute the word statistics for that model, or for that document. Then what I do is I go and save those word statistics for the document, from that were computed by the numbers in the model. Okay. And then I do some hocus pocus while I'm searching, and hopefully by putting it all together, I will get answers that incorporate the knowledge or the information from the document. But in actuality, I really don't. I just get a bunch of different words, right? Because that's all this thing is doing, is it's putting together likely words.
Right.
Right. So when you say, hey, could the LLM tell me where it's referenced? If whatever software you had actually kept track of the specific references, kind of like, okay, with your median baseball thing. Yeah. If the actual software you had actually kept track of debuts and had a median function that could get to that, that median player at any particular time, then it has that functionality. Like expecting to extract that from word patterns and statistics is expecting way too much.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I think I told you about this. My experience driving my sister-in-law's car the other day is the roads are becoming the roads have more context on them, and we're gaining more and more context all the time. It's becoming harder to drive in a new city. Like you haven't been there before. You're like, what, can I drive in the bus lane or not? Because there's not a sign that tells you. And maybe there is, but you've seen 15 other signs, and so, but a car can handle that. And so there's way more paint, way more things. And I'm realizing that some of the self-driving problem is going to be improved by context.
I'll give you an example of that. Have you noticed in South County, now this has been the case when you get south of San Onofre for a long time, but have you noticed in South County as they've widened the 5, that all the exits are exit 62, exit 63, exits 82, 83. The names are not, they're secondary. And then when you try to use that with navigation in your, like Google Navigation or Apple Maps or whatever else, is they're always exit at exit 63. And the exit 63 part of the sign is becoming bigger and bigger to dominate the name of the street. Yeah. Like there you go. Yeah. Exactly.
And for a long time, we didn't even have exit numbers in California.
Just only very close to borders.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. So that context, that driving context, will that enter our report writing and other office product world? Will we change how we communicate? I mean, we've seen this in so many different things where the access to information changes the value of the information we used to use. It doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It doesn't necessarily produce better things, but the system wants these different values, alphanumeric as opposed to Roman numerals, right? Roman numerals do the job, but Arabic numbers are just better.
Well, Arabic numbers are positional. I can't remember if you and I talked about this offline or in a previous episode or when, but a great exercise, if you want to give it to somebody, is show me how to do Roman numeral math without converting it to Arabic numerals, to Arabic numbers.
Yeah, I mean,
I know. Yeah, mind blown when you sit down and try to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's math just to write.
Yes.
Right.
Right. It's an effort. Yes.
And you're like, what is it? So 1987 is, let me see, I need a C in there. I
Right.
got a minus. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think a smart fifth or sixth grader could probably work that out. It's not terribly difficult. It's a matter of doing the work to work out the methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get back to MMOJO because
Yes.
that's ultimately the reason why we're chatting today. And it's for everybody looking. This is where you get one. Right there.
Yeah.
What do those things cost, Brad? Just like the standard MMOJO device.
$250. And this is our quote low end device, if you will. I'm going to have some higher end devices which are capable of running bigger models. The big point of it is that I plug in two things. I plug in a power cable and I plug an Ethernet cable into this and into my router. And of course, if you want to do Wi-Fi, we can do Wi-Fi. You just have to plug it into your TV so you can configure the Wi-Fi. This is so easy to configure. My mom could do it. You can be up and running in 10 minutes. And you can have an LLM that when you can chat with it, or you can use my completion interface, as I call it. When you work with it, you're going to find that it feels about as knowledgeable as the LLMs in the cloud. It's just not as annoyingly loquacious. And that's because it's doing language. Remember, it's not doing math. We've established before that it's not doing math. It's not doing special access to data sets that, only you could have through a particular cloud provider. It does not remember your, on the server itself, it does not remember your queries or its answers. It does, if you want to copy something out, you have to copy it out and paste it into a document. It doesn't try to integrate with things. It tries to keep your conversations with it, if you will. It tries to keep them private. It doesn't share them with the cloud. It won't rat you out. If you ask it, how do I bury a body? Like, it may lecture you and say, hey, consult with the authorities first. But it's not going to go, there's no chance it's going to go and consult with the authorities and say, hey, this guy wants to know how to bury a body. You might want to visit him. This is a real problem. This is a real problem in the UK today. Real problem. That a problem so much so that our own vice president is saying we should link whatever trade deal we do to the ability of UK citizens to just have privacy of their thoughts.
Yeah. Boy, that's a crazy
I know.
thing.
That's not the birthplace of the Anglosphere, and we're it's like we're having problems like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too tied up in that stuff. It's certainly interesting to talk about the erosion of free speech in England, but let's get back to the AIs.
Sure.
If I wanted to write a novel about what happens, 5 years in the future, about the reduction of free speech in the Anglosphere, how is AI going to be at predicting the future?
I think probably just as good as anybody else who puts words together, or just as bad as anybody who puts words together. You're going to put some words together, and then we're going to have to say, okay, we're going to have to wait for 5 years to see if your prediction came true. Right? You can make a very compelling prediction. You can put some reasons down for why you think it is, and you can talk about the trends, and you can talk about how people are thinking about things. And of course, we'll have technology will help us, or an evolution in human kindness will help us. The Dalai Lama will help us, or whatever else. But at the end of the day, we got to wait the 5 years to see. And human beings aren't terribly good at that either. So whatever the LLM spits out, if it's correct English sentence structure, it's probably got a chance of being as right as your favorite human being.
Do you think it could extrapolate using, again, access to stats, a better model for, like, say, sports betting or prognosticating the finish? Like we got the hockey and basketball playoffs. Could it outguess the final 64 tournament? Could it
not a language, not a language model? And if there was any chance it could provide any advantage whatsoever, it already would have flooded betting markets. Like you would absolutely not use your own intuition or your own random number generator to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I'm going to put Mojo to work in my house, apart from telling me great recipes for chili verde or whatever it's going to be, what else can it do?
That was my example. You could write stories for your kids. If you're raising kids today, this isn't like an indictment of public schools or teachers or saying they don't put in the effort or whatever else. But the results right now are that a third of third graders can't read. Probably the best thing that you can do for your kids, and I worked for 10 years with literary experts or literacy experts. So this is sort of paraphrasing what we tried to do back in the day without LLMs, with having other people, actual people write stories, is create them stories that are relevant to them. So they have them as the subject of the story. They have things they're familiar with, maybe their pets, maybe their favorite toys or their favorite fictional characters, Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. I know you love those, but that's why I use those as an example, because like the kids want to hear a story with those things. Create stories about, and create subjects that they're familiar with, problems they're familiar with. You have a sewage leak in your house and everybody's got to, work around the kitchen or, not go indoors with their shoes on or whatever else, and make a story about that. Make something that they can read. Make a different story for them to read every day. You will have eager, attentive readers. You'll have people who want to read.
You're saying Eeyore attentive readers, not
Eeyore, right? Eeyore and Igor attentive. Eager. Yes. That's how you create, kids that like to read. Is you give them interesting things to read.
And they could also, in theory, then practice. They could write their own story.
They could write their own story. They could get help writing their own story. They could collaborate with the LLM to write a story. Have the LLM write me a story, and then go and change that story so it's more to this point. Like, that's a great exercise. What teacher in school is doing that today? None.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you are a school librarian, or if you're a teacher trying to teach kids how to read, the MMOJO device is something that you could get for a very small amount of money, and it would open the world up. I mean, yes, of course, read books, that kind of thing. But if you want to just do a quick lesson on, or a quick story on something, MMOJO can do that.
It's funny. A lot of times you get the most validation for your product ideas or your direction or whatever you're working on from the critics. And probably the greatest criticism of that is, a bad LLM story could ruin a young reader.
Yeah.
Come on.
I've got a real life example of that. That's a great example. So we have this thing called the Rehab in the military world. And that is a radio in a box. You show up, bam, radio station in a box. Wow. And then we want to control it and put out messages, right? So let's just use America as an example. Let's say that all of our religious messaging comes from evangelical Baptists, Pentecostalists in the South, Mississippi. Right. And they're writing all of the Christian text that we're going to broadcast out across this nation. You're smiling because you know how ridiculous that is, right?
Yeah, it's just insane.
And then when we're trying desperately to get the governor to matter in that region, because they're new to that region in terms of being a governor. And so we'll yank him by his collar and take him around all the different villages. He's like, hey, here I am. I'm your governor. Woo, boy, here I am with the Americans, right? And like just putting him on Front Street. And he doesn't want to do that. And he has other work to do. By the way, we never asked this guy. We never set an appointment. We just say on Tuesday, we're going to show up unannounced, grab you by the collar, throw you in a military vehicle, and drive around all over town and force you to interact because you're too stupid to do it yourself, right? So there's all these problems with this thing. Okay, so Pete will say, hey, why don't we just give him the fucking microphone on the radio and let him talk to people? What? No, what? He might say something bad.
Without pre-approving his messages?
Yeah, he's the governor. Let him. What if he says something bad? We'll get mad at him. We'll just shake our fist and say, don't you do that, mister.
Pete, isn't the left side of the aisle trying to do this with podcasts right now?
Are they? I don't know.
Kind of. Like you have something. You have some tools that are cheap to produce and distribute. You have some people who have used them to whatever ends they've used them for. And then somebody wants to come in and plan how it is and, completely micromanage it, completely prematurely optimize it for a particular outcome. You see how these themes all come back, right?
Yeah.
And they're universal. It's not just tech. It's, here it is, the military with this communication device. Maybe I'll tell you what, why don't we have this funded only through Voice of America? That sounds like a great plan.
Right. Yeah, sure. Why not do that? Yeah. And then when the audience doesn't show up,
Right.
like if you start with a $12 million contract and you don't have an audience that equals that.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the basic conversion rates for audience, and it's just not that high, right?
Right.
And so if you're at, we'll just say Michelle Obama, a lot of people love Michelle Obama. A lot of people do. But enough to get whatever, $12 million and really double that, right? Because you got to make money. So are $24 million is $24 million of value going to come back through that machine in the podcast world? No. No way. So it doesn't matter if you want to control something if you don't understand it. And this is a very big, this is a government thing, not a left thing, although there is some left sensibility in this. When we want to control something, we think we know what the answer is. And this is where I bring in one of my slogans from the field. You cannot presume to you cannot presume to improve the condition of something you refuse to understand the condition of. And that is the hallmark of all of these things is I want to control podcasts. I want to control how stories are told in classrooms because the outcomes are bad. He hates these cans. That's why these kids can't read.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think you have to listen. I think that's probably what of course LLMs don't listen. I mean, they're not active listeners, but what they do is they do take your input and whatever your input is, and they work on your input. And that's probably the closest that's probably closer to listening that technology is getting us out the door by taking inputs, running a process on them, giving an output, than we as human beings do with things that we probably ought to listen to. Is a lot of times we ignore it, we substitute our own stuff in, and we get outputs that are not relevant. Right? Makes us worse than the machines. Like all we have to do is just listen a little bit, just hear what the person's saying, what they want to do. Like put your flavor on it, right? Like bend it a little bit to where you want to go. Sure. Right? Like make the message a little bit more America than, whatever insane fuckery the governor wants to talk about or thinks is important to his people. Put a little bit in there, but listen to his message and know that he knows what connects.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing, right? Like he is the governor. He knows what he needs to do. And so hopefully he's got a command of the words or has someone that has command of the words to tell them. Because what would happen with these things is they would say, hey, this is the governor. I'm on the mic. You want to come down and check me out? I'm down here at the governor's office doing governor shit. Why don't you come on down? And then we would set that up in advance. And then folks would come on down for whatever reason.
Right.
And we would invent reasons for them to come down. And some of these inventions are not inventions. It's like, hey, don't forget, if you come down here, the Americans got a bunch of shit you can have. I'll give you, and in this case, I'll give you old parachutes. And then bam, a line of Afghans. We'll take fucking old parachutes, not to kill us, not to make parachute bombs, but to make shade in a place with no trees, Right. And the folks who want to control things would never allow that because they hadn't even thought about the fact that there's no trees there, And by the way, I did my job. I go out and I'm like, what are you going to do with these things? Oh, let me show you. They were all super proud,
Yeah.
And so we turned this thing that was completely ineffective. Wait, let me back up. A lot of times when you come across the rehab in combat, it will not be doing what the person who owns that rehab says it's doing, right? So as a rule, now I've learned that whenever I go and they're like, hey, it's a rehab over here. Okay, great. I bring the radio. It's got a crank dynamo. It's got a battery. It's got a solar. It's super great. I turn it on to their channel. Nope, not there. There's nothing there. And then here's the best part. I would go to that guy. It's usually the EWO, the electronics warfare officer, and I'd say, hey, I got bad news. your radio that you've been briefing is working. That shit don't work. And then he'll say, ah, you did it wrong. You're an idiot. And I'm like, I'm telling you right now, it doesn't work. I tried all the channels. I tried locations. I couldn't get that thing to turn on. Well, I don't care. I'm like, I'm going to brief that to the boss.
Right.
And then they're like, yeah, don't care what you say, because this person doesn't know me, right? And so then I'd be like, oh, hold on. That's not accurate. I went to 7 locations, and because I've done my job. And that guy would look at me like I just ran over his dog. And I'm like, motherfucker, I told you I was going to take. So all this stuff goes into these rehab type things. And rehab is just a placeholder for all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you look at something and you say it's going to do a certain thing, whether it's AI or a radio in a box, you got to do the work to see if it's working. You got to go and check your facts on the thing. Is this telling me the story of the A's? Is it accurate? It's telling me I should blame John Fisher. But Walter Haas is the one that gave up the rights to San Jose.
The real question is, can you run the Sportsnet LA app on it? Because without that, no Dodger games, no Laker games.
Even with let me get me going on that.
I won't get you going. Rehab. You finally mentioned what it stands for. Radio in a box, which
radio
is
in a box.
A very cool acronym. Yeah.
One of the times I found a rehab to not be there at all. Right, so I didn't find it. I found nothing.
Yeah.
And I went to the boss and I'm like, not only is that thing not broadcasting, it don't exist. It's worse. Here are the last 4 units that have been saying it's broadcasting, and I can't find any evidence of that thing ever existing. Yeah. And then the boss is just losing his mind.
Peter, because, sort of a related thing, and to just kind of, make it a little bit more big picture. I'm not the only one who's like pleasantly surprised every time Starlink comes up as a little solution for something. Like, there's a guy, Elon, and his company that have just, for 10 years, they've just cranked away and put the satellites up. They've made the device more affordable, more portable, more connectable. And now, every time it comes up that, hey, wouldn't it be great to have internet in some godforsaken place where we can't lay a bunch of cable, they're like an easy, inexpensive solution. And it's because they did the work, right? The product works, and now we can apply it to these crazy situations where we couldn't apply this stuff before.
Right.
And that's that's our industry needs to do more of that. And this LLM thing, this LLM distraction that we're on, probably doesn't do it so much.
Yeah, and enough with you're not essential, your job's replaceable stuff.
Right.
I mean, look, when that happens, it's going to be there, and their person is going to realize it. But telling a marketer that they're replaceable, and then every time, if anybody who's good at marketing, they laugh at the proposition of a computer doing their job, because their job is to know pop culture. They know what happens. They know it moves people.
Right. Come up with a Sportsnet LA reference 10 years after that was a thing. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, so we've been doing this for a little over an hour, and I appreciate it. Everybody should definitely go and check out Mojo, mojo.net to get your Mojo device. $250 for the baseline. I'm sure Brad will customize something for you. And also, I build get on a call with them.
I build these by hand. If you're wondering, hey, why would I want to get these? I'll get on a Zoom with you and tell you why you need one. I'm not going to spend an hour and 13 minutes with you like I just did with Pete. But you might get 20 minutes out of me, convincing you, hey, you're doing good things with LLM, sorta. Adjust change your tack a little bit, and you'll be using these for, perfect applications. I'll help you with that.
And I would imagine that a lot of the other LLM companies out there that are selling LLM things are charging a lot more money and promising a lot more results. I've seen multiple key tabs for all the tasks you can put on an LLM, and I'm like, man, oh man, how much? $2,500.
Yeah,
I don't know.
ChatGPT, ChatGPT, $20 a month. Okay, so you'll pay $10 more the first year to have your own and have it private. $200 a month. Well, there's a month usage, or $2,000 a month. Those are the 3 price points right now, and that's what you're looking at with the cloud industry.
Can I have you train it on Larry Sanger's key? He's got one of these USB drives that has every book ever made. Can we train it on that thing?
So, so actually, that's where I learned that retrieval augmented generation and talking to your documents was bullshit, because I trained it on the Bible. I imported the Bible, okay, the
Yeah.
King James version of the Bible, in order to tell sillier stories about characters from the present going back to biblical times and saving characters from making terrible decisions,
Yeah.
right? And it wrote worse stories after I trained it. It wrote better stories without the training. Now, and of course, I don't have metrics on that. I just have, this was a good story. Now it's not writing good stories after I've trained it. What the hell's going on here?
Right. What the hell's going on?
But that was my observation as somebody who was trying to solve a problem with this. So the answer is yes, I could train it on Larry Sanger's, on all of his books that are in the public domain. Gutenberg project is what he's doing. I could train it on the Gutenberg project, and it will do worse work after I do that. Guaranteed.
That's crazy.
Isn't it though?
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's how the algorithms work.
So the more I train it, the shittier it gets. Just let it work on the random numbers that it generates.
Let it work on the language it knows about, and it'll give you some pretty awesome results. Yeah.
While we were talking, I asked Grok to tell me the most entertaining article I've written on Twitter. There's an article tab for everybody who's not on X. And it said this: I can't access this. And I was like, wow.
That was honest.
And by the way, it's your own system, Rocky.
Right. Well,
you can't.
Ask it. Well, again, ask it for the median baseball player from the database at baseballreference.com and see if it's that honest with you this time.
I want to build an experiment. I might do this where I do a daily, a Kramer thing, where I do a daily stock buy based upon Grok's advice, and then just track it and see how it does.
Yeah. Do that with phony money. Don't actually buy. You will go into the ground.
No, I'm not going to actually use the thing. I just here's Grok's stock buy of the day,
right?
And then just track it every day, ding 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 ding, and be like, it'll probably match the indexed average, probably, because
over time, that's what you'd expect. Yeah. Too much.
All right. Anything in closing before we go? Everybody go to mojo.net. Get a hold of Brad. He's on LinkedIn. You can always talk to him. He's glad to do it, even for an hour and 13 minutes if you want, but you got to pay him for that. Brad?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, mojo.net. And, listen to the Break It Down show. You get interesting ideas like this. I looked through the whole PBS catalog, mourning the death of funding of PBS and NPR. I found nothing like this there, Pete. And even the things that did look like they might be something like this were $3.99 an episode. So you do a good job.
There you go. I do a good job. Well, thank you for that. All right, everybody. I will see you all, I guess, tomorrow. And Brad, I will talk to you later.
Yeah. Adios.